In this lecture, we will discuss about the ongoing USA-India negotiation on bilateral trade agreement. So, India is exploring the possibility of an early tranche during the 90-day tariff pause window. The two sides have also finalized the terms of reference for the agreement. So, the talks for the proposed bilateral trade agreement are gaining momentum with the past in person 3-day negotiations between the chief negotiators of the two countries, and it is already begun on April 23rd in Washington. So the very visit is significant as India is exploring the possibility of an early tranche during the 90-day tariff pause window. So the two sides have also finalized the terms of reference for the agreement. So a list of questions and answers to be explained the very importance of the visit of the Vice President of United States of America and the implications of high tariffs on China for India. So the USA and India have aimed for a bilateral trade agreement which is a kind of free trade free trade pact. The two have decided to conclude the proposed bilateral trade agreement in two tranches or phases. They have fixed a deadline to conclude the first phase by the fall of September, October of 2025. So, however, taking advantage of the 90-day tariff pause window, India is exploring the opportunity to discuss an early tranche. Under this, both sides can look at discussing issues like greater market access for a limited number of goods, unlike maximum number of goods covered in a full trade agreement, and cutting down non-tariff barriers. This could set the stage for more complex negotiations, such as issues like government procurement and digital trade in subsequent phases. However, the early tranche is possible only if it results in a win-win outcome for both. As India has already made this kind of a pact with Australia, and as it is the economic cooperation and trade agreement between India and Australia entered into force on December 29, 2022. Now they are negotiating a comprehensive trade pact by widening the very scope of economic cooperation and trade agreement as between India and Australia. So, as USA President Donald Trump announced sweeping reciprocal tariffs or import duties on a number of countries, including India and China, on April 2. However, on April 9, he announced a 90-day suspension of these tariffs until July 9 this year, except for those in China and Hong Kong, as about 75 countries approached America for trade deals. China is facing up to 245% duty on its goods entering into America. However, the 10% baseline tariff imposed on the countries on April 2 on the Liberation Day remains in effect. Besides the 25% duties on steel, aluminum, and auto components, so semiconductors, pharmaceuticals, and certain energy products are under the exemption category. Earlier in the month of April 2025, the Trump administration expanded this category by including smartphones, computers, and certain other electronics imported mainly from China. And it will help protect India's export to the USA from potential American tariffs. These mainly include the scope and objectives of the trade pact as it is aimed as between USA and India regarding the very terms of references under the India-USA bilateral trade agreement. According to sources, it would cover around 19 chapters such as tariffs, non-tariff barriers, goods, rules of origin and customs facilitation. The bilateral trade agreement was announced during the visit of the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to Washington DC on February 13, 2025. Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal visited Washington from March 4 to 6, during which he met his U.S. counterparts, U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer and Commerce Secretary Ward Lutnick. Brandon Lynch, the Assistant U.S. Trade Representative for South and Central Asia, was in India from March 25 to 29, 2025 for trade discussion with Indian officials. In that deliberation, they decided to virtually hold sectoral level engagements in the coming weeks. Now the Indian team is visiting the United States. So the key elements of the bilateral trade agreement. The pact has aimed at more than doubling the bilateral trade in goods and services to US$ 500 billion by 2030 from the current US$ 191 billion, while the USA is looking at duty concession in sectors like certain industrial goods and also on electric vehicles, wines, dairy products, apples, tree nuts, and petrochemical products. So, in particularly, the USA duty concession, which particularly USA looks at, is not only on industrial goods and automobiles, and when it refers to automobiles, in particularly electric vehicles, and also wines, petrochemical products, dairy and agricultural items such as apple tree nuts. India also look at duty cuts from USA tariff regime, in particularly in relating to duty cuts on apparels, textiles, gems, and jewelry, leather, plastics, chemicals, oilseeds, shrimp, horticultural products. So, in particularly, India may look at duty cuts for labor intensive sectors like apparel, textiles, gems and jewelry, leather, plastics, chemicals, oilseeds, and agricultural products. So, as $500 billion emission requires new fair trade terms, the two sides announced plans to negotiate the first tranche of a mutually beneficial multi-sector bilateral trade agreement by fall of 2025. The leaders committed to ensure that the trade relationship fully reflects the aspirations of the catalyzing opportunities for military partnership, accelerated commerce, and technology. To advance this innovative, wide ranging bilateral trade agreement, the two countries will take an integrated approach to strengthen and defend bilateral trade across the goods and services sector and will work towards increasing market access, reducing tariff and non-tariff barriers, and deepening supply chain integration. The USA welcomed India's measure to lower tariffs on US products of interest in the areas of carbon, motorcycle, ICT products and metals, as well as measures to enhance market access for US agricultural products like alfalfa and duck meat and medical devices. India and the USA are looking to enhance collaboration in building resilient supply chains in areas such as critical minerals, semiconductors, and pharmaceuticals. It will help both sides diversify their supply chains and cut dependence on a few countries. So, the very discussion of this lecture is around the ongoing USA-India negotiation on bilateral trade agreement. So, this agreement would be beneficial to India as US President Donald Trump announced a 90-day tariff pause window on April 9, 2025, and it will end on July 9, 2025. So, on the very basis of the terms of references, so on two tranches or phases, the negotiation is going to finalize. So on the early tranche, it would be possible to reach a stage as India has already had a bilateral trade agreement with Australia in 2022, which is known as Economic Cooperation and Trade Agreements. And now it is particularly emphasized by the negotiators from both sides, USA and India, that they will go through 19 chapters regarding tariffs, non-tariff barriers, goods, rules of origin and customs, and particularly the key element that is required by the United States. They require duty concession on industrial goods, electric vehicles, wines, dairy products, agricultural products like apples, tree nuts, and petrochemical products. Also, India is aiming at duty cuts on the products of India such as the intensive labor sectors such apparels, textiles, gems and jewelry, leather, plastics, chemicals, oil seed, shrimp, horticultural products. So, both the countries are endeavoring for catalyzing opportunities for military partnership, accelerated commerce and technology which would sustain if the very negotiation or the going on bilateral trade agreement between United States and India would be finalized. Naturally it would lead to catalyzing opportunities for military partnership and accelerated commerce and technology in between the two trading partners.